6, which one does this resemble? Inverse secant, right? Inverse secant is the only one that has something on the bottom outside of the square root, right? So it's 1 over u times square root of u squared minus 1. So this resembles inverse secant. So we're going to try and get it to look that way. Remember, the first step in any, no matter what it is to get the 1 in the denominator. So this 9, we need to change that into a 1. But it's a little different from the last ones we did, because here it's under a square root. So to make that happen, we have to actually multiply not just by 1/9, but the square root of 1/9. Right? In order to multiply under that square root, we have to have our number under the square root as well. So I can multiply the top by square root of 1/9, but do we need it under the square root? No, so we can simplify that one. What's the square root of 1/9? 1/3. Right? So we need it under the square root down here. We're not going to simplify it because it has to be multiplied underneath here. But the one on top doesn't need to be under a square root, so we can simplify it. I'm going to bring that 1/3 out in front, just like we did before. And then we have 1 over x times the square root of 1/9 x to the 4th minus 1 dx. So once we get that 1 in the denominator, now we can set up what's u squared, u, and du. So what's our u squared? 1/9 x to the 4th. So u, the square root of that, is going to be 1/3 x squared. Right, square root of 1/9 is 1/3. Square root of x to the 4th is x squared. And then our du will just be 2/3 x dx. Now this is where secant is a little bit different than the other ones. If you look at the little yellow sheet, the little half sheet, step 3 says multiply accordingly to get du. So that's what we've done so far for the other ones. But in parentheses it says and u for inverse secant. So when you have inverse secant, before we get the du part to be good, we actually have to get the u part first. We need to make sure this part outside the square root on the bottom has to be the same as this. So how are we going to make the x into a 1/3 x squared? Multiply by 1/3 x, right? So we're going to multiply by 1/3 x on the bottom, but if we do that on the bottom, we also have to do it on the top to keep things balanced. And we can't bring that x out in front because it's a variable. We can only do that with constants. But I'm just going to leave everything in there for right now, and you'll see why. So on top, we're left with 1/3 x. Bottom, we have 1/3 x squared times the square root of 1/9 x to the 4th minus 1 dx. So let's take a look at some of the things we have. We know that our u squared is 1/9 x to the 4th. Right? That's going to be our u squared. We have our u in place now, the 1/3 x squared. The last thing we have to do is our du. So we need to make sure we have everything for that. Well, we've got the x and the dx. And we have a 1/3, but we need it to be 2/3. So what can we multiply the inside by to make this 2/3 x? Just 2, right? So if we multiply that by 2, that's going to give us the 2/3 x dx that we need. Multiply the outside by 1/2. So we get 1/6, and then all of this becomes our du. So 1 over u times square root of u squared minus 1 du. So we successfully made that inside the integral a derivative of inverse secant. So that means the antiderivative of this is inverse secant of u. So our u was 1/3 x squared.